Welcome to the Camp Constitution Report with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on our YouTube channel, Podomatic, Rumble, and about a half a dozen other formats. Brought to you by Camp Constitution, which, among other things, runs a week-long family camp. Our camp is coming up July 12th to the 17th at the beautiful Singing Hills Christian Camp and Retreat Center in Plainfield, New Hampshire. We've got a ladies' retreat coming up in early May, and I'll be up in the county, up in northern Maine, next week from Wednesday to Saturday, giving a number of presentations on the persecuted Christians, not just around the world, but here in the United States and even in Maine. So to learn more about it, just visit our website, campconstitution.net, and there'll be all kinds of other things you can do, our YouTube channel and our downloads and all great resources that we have. Well, before I introduce David, I got to turn off the external speaker because I think there'll be some feedback here. So let me do that. One of these days, I'll get a very sophisticated sound system here. Here we go. But it wouldn't record right if I didn't. Anyway, so our guest today is somebody that I first met. It was January of 2020, just a few months before the lockdown. I met him up in a I was we were sharing the I guess the pulpit in the church in Aroostook County, and we worked together. I remember the lockdown. I think it was July of 2020 when I was Reverend Kraft, and normally we're at all kinds of events, but everything was locked down. But Aroostook County wasn't as bad as most places. They were a little more laissez-faire. And Dave's been down to our Lane house in Lexington, and been a few years though since we connected. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. So, Dave, you have absolutely an incredible story. It was when I first heard your presentation, it was almost incredible, shocking to hear how God delivered you. From from an early age, you were abused sexually. So, give the viewers and listeners a little background about yourself.
Used to like one of the most key factors for me for my story is that my father took his life. So I was a young boy that was seeking male validation, and so we see that a lot in today's society. And and being that it put a target on my back actually, and there were many people, like a few teachers, a friend's father, neighbors, that took advantage of the fact that I was a young boy that was looking for male validation and male affirmation. And so I was abused sexually throughout my childhood. Um, I around 9 or 10, I started dissociating from self, which is very common amongst trauma victims. They dissociate, and that's where a lot of gender dysphoria comes into play. It's the abnormal condition of mental confusion, which is what dysphoria means. So that came in around 9 or 10, where I started to believe that I was a girl trapped in a boy's body, since I was being used like a girl by men. And seeing that women in my life were getting the type of validation and affirmation that I was looking for, the just the intimacy and the hugs, the holding, that type of stuff that I was looking for. And so I thought, yeah, I definitely was supposed to be a girl. And so by the age of 13, I overdosed on pills. And by the age of 14, my mother took me out of South Jersey and took me to Philadelphia because she thought she had no other options. And that actually, for me, that was like out of the frying pan into the fire.
Mm.
Philadelphia was South Jersey just on steroids. And so at 14, my mom said, "Look, I had a son. I didn't have a daughter. Your name is David. You cannot be Paige. You can't. I'm not going to do this. You're not. I'm not finding these things in the house. I'm not going to be dealing with this. You can't do it under this roof." So I ran away. And at 14, I lived on the streets of Philadelphia. I became a prostitute. I was already addicted to sex. I abused alcohol. I abused drugs. And I was also HIV AIDS positive at age 14. And one of the moments that stand out most to me from that time was me going to my peers, the older transgenders, who immediately took me under their wings, and would let me stay in their homes so that they could actually prostitute me, pimp me out. And then there were what they call glitter families that would come out and find kids on the street and love bomb them, take them home, and then traffic them basically. And so I fell victim to that a few times. But I went to my peers and said, "What am I going to do? I'm HIV positive." And they said, "So what? So are we." And the blankety blank
Mm.
that gave it to you didn't care. So don't you care who you give it to?
Wow.
And I was 14. I started wrong sex hormones at 14, which made my mental capacity just chaotic. I
Dave,
was,
let me. What year was this, by the way, when you were
so
doing
this
this?
was, gosh, I was 14. So this was 86, 85, 86. And this was before all of this that we see today being
Mhm.
promoted everywhere you go and being forced upon people.
That's
And
why I
so,
ask the time frame. So even as far back as the 80s, even earlier than that, there was this so-called, I can't use the word medication, I use it chemicals, were
well,
around
that's what they
before.
are, synthetic poisons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they don't belong in your body. Even for a woman that a doctor tries to give her estrogen because of a loss of estrogen, they should say no. They're synthetic and they're poisons. But yeah, so and this was common to get on the streets. It wasn't you couldn't go to a doctor and get it. I'm sure you could, but I wasn't going to a doctor to get it. I was buying it on the black market. I was taught how to inject myself, taught what pills to get, what pills to take. Um, so this just destroyed me mentally. I was emotionally a wreck, and which is kind of like the goal, I believe, is one of the goals. As we see, I got a question not long ago that asked me, David, why is the left and why are now Islamists embracing and promoting and pushing this trans queer agenda when especially the Islam, they're supposed to hate them, but
That's right.
it's because they're creating super soldiers, right? They're creating martyrs like human bombs, really. They're creating this because that's what synthetic poisons, especially estrogen and most definitely testosterone, do to individuals. They destroy the brain, so they alter the brain development, and then they alter the brain. They alter your moods. They alter your nervous system. So they're creating these mass shooters. They're creating these rages that are within people when they start attacking other people.
I
Um,
know it's there's big money in this, but I think it's more than money. I mean, money is like the secondary. I think it's the ideology. I
yeah,
also think that birth control has something to do with it too.
it
The
absolutely
idea,
does.
population control, I should say,
Yep.
because if you're messed up, the reproductive parts are messed up. If they don't get you in the abortion mill, they're going to get you in high school or college, where
Yep.
they're going to mess up your brain. And I know that there are some cases where they're irreversible. Sometimes they can reverse things, in some
Yes.
cases they can't.
Yeah.
And they can live near normal lives, but many of them not. And it's not a big, what's the percentage of the population offhand, that are kind of getting into this? Is it two
So
or
it's
three
not
percent?
as small as we think it is. Let
Yeah.
me let me put it like that. It's not as small as we think it is. So it's actually very high. And really all anybody has to do is go to their local mall, sit on a bench, and look at everybody walking around them. And they can see that there is something severely wrong with these people, that they all
Yeah.
fall under this trans umbrella. Now, it's not only gender dysphoria that fall under this trans identification. It's also what they call AGP or autogynephiles, who are men that are just sexually aroused by the thought of themselves as women or wearing women's clothing,
Yeah.
especially undergarments, even nail polish. And then there are the fetishists, and then there are the ones who just want to jump on the bandwagon, like we have seen throughout history with punk rock and grunge and the goth, and they just want to belong to something, to anything, because they're so distraught, they're so damaged or so
Mhm.
traumatized. And so, like for me, when I started wrong sex hormones at 14, I again tried to end my life at 16, and then by
Mm-hmm.
age 20 I was sterile. By age 25 I had osteopenia, which is severe bone loss, and then osteoporosis by age 30, which was unheard of because I was 30 years old with a elderly woman's bone disease. And it's all stems to the wrong sex hormones, all stems from that. Um, my heart conditions, my that stemmed from it, thyroid issues. Um, in my adult years, I was able to especially since detransitioning, I was able to find out why I had most of the issues that I had medically and physically. So, um, I mean, I was in and out of county jail, juvenile detention, county jail, state prison, and it was my last time in prison where a correctional officer saw me looking like a woman on the rec yard cheerleading for the guys playing basketball because it's all about really being the center of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he came up to me, he says, "What's your name?" And I said, "Paige." And he said, "No, that's a girl's name. What's the
Mm-hmm.
name your mama gave you?" And I was like, "David." And he was like, "Well, David, do you know that God didn't create you to be this way?" And I was offended. I was hurt. I was angry. How dare he? And so I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Of course he did. Look at me. I do this so well." And I said something about it being natural. And he says, "No," he says, "if it's natural, then how many pills did you have to take to look like that? How many procedures have did you have to have done to look the way you look?" And then, that got me thinking. And he told me that every day he saw me, he says, "David, God didn't create you to be that way." And it got to the point where I would see him and I'd be like, "I know God didn't create me to be this way." And so, like, when I got out of prison in 2006, I had detransitioned at that point, but I did not change my ways. I still kept living um, within the LGBTQ movement, within that cult. And so I just was living as a homosexual man at that time. And the perversion of it was it just overtakes you. Um, it just feeds every perverted, vile, lewd, lascivious thought or feeling that anybody could ever have. And so by 2009, I ended up on my deathbed. I had full blown AIDS. I had infections in my brain, infections in my blood, no immune system. They put hospice in place, put a hospital bed in my home, and gave me less than 3 months. And that was when I picked up the word of God, and that's when he poured life into me. And that's what it was. It was like the Father. It was I didn't have a church, I didn't have a congregation, there were no deacons laying hands on me and
Mm-hmm.
praying over me. It was
Anointed with
just
oil.
me
Yeah.
and him. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And he let me know that I had a father. And that was pretty much what made me whole again, knowing that I had a father who loved me unconditionally. And you know, I dove into the word. I soaked it up like a sponge, and I gave it all to him, and I surrendered, and he touched me. And when I woke up one morning knowing that I was forgiven for all that I had done and that I was not going to hell, because I knew that was one thing I knew on my deathbed. I'm afraid because I don't want to die, because I don't want to go to hell.
Mm.
And I knew that hell was exactly where I was going. And I also knew that it wasn't like where God was sending me, but he was honoring my choice to go there. And so it was, for me, it was life changing. And then when I realized I was forgiven, I just said, "I'm ready to go. Take me home, please. I don't want to be here anymore. This place
Right.
is horrible. Take me." And that was when he touched me and he rose me up.
And he
And
said, "I got work for you. You're not going
yeah,
anywhere. You got
yeah.
work down here to do."
Yep.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and it's amazing because even, after 11 years of doing ministry, I actually walked away from the fold for a short period. And it was kind of like, I have all this Bible knowledge now. I've never had this. Maybe I could be a gay Christian. And so really what was needed was just deliverance. And but God let me walk away from the fold, and he let me experience that so that I could learn so much more about this movement, even on the political realm, and what it, actually, like, what it has done over hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of its existence. And so, I mean, he just kind of let me know, like, this is perversion. You cannot claim this false identity and walk in a right relationship with me. And there is freedom. And bam, he reeled me back in. And I mean, he kind of set off a fire in me at that moment, like now, more than back when I was rescued from my own deathbed. Um, because I recognize that everything I have belongs to him, that every breath I take is because of him.
Yeah.
And so, and so he's set me firmly on this ground, and it's for such a time as this. Um, I never got into the political realm on these things, and I mean it's pretty much obvious that you have to be involved, you have to be standing up, speaking out, and pushing back, because if you don't, then there's a whole lot of children that are being targeted and desensitized and sexualized and victimized and criminalized and then weaponized against us, against anyone that opposes them. And and that's kind of the structure. Like, you mentioned big pharma. And so big pharma funds all of the trans rights organizations. They fund all of the gender clinics, so they fund these
Interesting.
things. And
Can you
but
give
I
some
mean, I always say transgenderism plus trans ageism, which is what we see now. A lot of the pederasty and the pedophilia that's happening, the minor attracted persons, the North American Man Boy Love Association, all of those types of things, all of the child trafficking rings we see getting broken up. That's all a part of the trans ageism. And then, like, for me, I say it equals transhumanism, because one of the only common denominators in all three of those categories is big pharma, which really is your government,
Mhm.
because that's who is funding your government's, all of your legislators' choices and votes. I mean, that's just how it's been working.
It's fascinating when we say big farmer. If you watch, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, you're watching the media, TV, Fox News, Newsmax, CNN, and all these others. Half the commercials are chemical or pharmacy. Or half, I'd say, maybe not quite half. In fact, I think one of these days I might just want to sit down and just every for 24-hour segment to see how many of them are actually pushing drugs. And
Well,
that's
let
why
me
they were
save you
so,
from that, because it's more than half. And
yeah,
actually, my mother has done that. She has sat
ashy.
there with a notepad and wrote down every single medication and how many commercials, and she's done. It's more than half. It's more than half.
And so many of them are psychotropics. And you love these commercials that if you're already taking one, take this one. And guess what?
Yeah,
You still might commit suicide. Oh, gee, sign me up,
yeah,
for
yeah.
that.
And it's crazy because, like, I hear what I hear when I do hear them is they talk about PML, um, as being a possibly fatal disease, PML. And PML means progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. And the only reason I know that is because a very good friend of mine had got PML, um, back when I was working on the streets, and it was actually like a symptom of him being HIV/AIDS positive.
Oh, yeah.
And so because he got this PML, it's a cancer that attacks the white matter of your brain, and you have like less than 30 days from
Oh, my.
diagnosis. And so and he checked out 30 days later.
Oh, my.
So it's like when I hear these things, I'm like, nobody in their right mind. I mean, I was on 30 something medications a day. And that includes like the major chronic depression, the bipolar, the anxiety, the PTSD that they told me, and all of these medications to go along with it. And so now, I had a heart attack a couple years ago, and that was, of course, due to not just the wrong sex hormones, causing something with the lining, but it also had to do with taking these prescription medications. I mean, pharmaceuticals, right? The word in the book is pharmakia, and
Yeah.
pharmakia translated is witchcraft, sorcery. I
Witchcraft.
mean,
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah.
But so I've completely went like all natural homeopath, and so I haven't been this healthy in a long time. And I
Yeah, I
won't, I
notice
re
on your website you do have some health products as well as your
yeah,
the materials you have. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and I refuse to take even over the counter. There's a natural, herbal, God-given solution to every ailment we can possibly come face to face with.
You know, years ago, I went to a doctor. I had flu symptoms, and he told me, we just treat the symptoms. So here's a prescription, and that's when it dawned. And this was back 25, 30 years ago. I said, I'm going to start listening to my so-called kooky right wing health friends and get into some of this because there's something there. I don't use that term. I don't. They're not kooky. They're very
Yeah.
well informed. And of course, I ended up getting COVID, like a lot of people did. And I didn't tell the government, "Oh, put me down. I'm another." I didn't get tested. I know I had it, and I've never felt this horrible in my life. And I took some of the stuff that the so-called horse tranquilizer, right, as well as B vitamins,
Oh,
and
like this.
yeah, oh yeah, 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 and it was gone.
Every
You
day,
know, yeah,
ivermectin.
and it was within and it was interesting too. People I knew that went to their doctors. Usually, you go to a doctor, they'll give you you're going to walk out with at least one prescription, even if it's a hangnail. They'll give you a prescription for it. But you go to these trained doctors that are trained by big pharma, to use medicines, chemicals, I should say. They didn't give them anything. I said that's unusual. They didn't say, "Hey, get some sunlight, go for a brisk walk,
Yeah.
take some vitamin B." No, they just go home and be miserable. And I'd never heard of that before. So I said, something's wrong. Something's really radically wrong here. And then there were other doctors, that weren't going along with the AMA and the CDC and all these other entities, and they were prescribing certain things that worked. It was hard to get. And today it's more mainstream. Now you'll see them advertised on TV now. But back then, oh, this you can't take this. It's a chemical. It's not going to work. It's a horse dewormer, and all that.
Yeah.
And boy, I tell you, they went to such great lengths. But we held the line, and that's that. One of the things you said, I remember you saying at one of your presentations, you said that the LGBT community is dark. He said
Yes.
the two guys down the street with the rainbow flag, they're not the problem, but it's the
Yeah.
LGBTQ. Make a distinction exactly. I mean, they're victims
So
of it, but
yeah, and here we are, what, 6 years later from me making that statement, and I can still say that it is mostly true. So like those that are wrapped up in or moved by. So like when I say like it's dark, it's a pederast organization. It's a entrapment basically because they're enveloping and saturating all of these people who've been traumatized and need an outlet or need to be loved and appreciated and embraced. And so when I say that, it's a lot of people think when I say the LGBTQ trans queer cult that they take it personal, and of course they do because
sure,
they're members and
yeah, of
advocates of
course,
it,
yeah,
just like I was. But I don't really mean the victims of that cult. And the victims of that cult are the ones you see, the cashier with the blue hair, the guy that has on lipstick and long nails, and the girl that wants to be a boy, and the boy that wants to be a girl, and the guy that wants to be having random sex with multiple, guys and girls, and it's like anyone who is a member of this movement is a victim of this movement. It's like I say, like not all same-sex attracted people or not all trans identified people are pederasts or pedophiles, but I can guarantee you that they're all victims of the pederast pedophile
right,
movement. So the whole agenda has already victimized them, which is why we now see the the promoters of anything trans are the ones that are where mostly surrounded with by children. They're teachers, counselors, scout leaders, coaches. These are the ones that are trying to speak out the most. And so I think that these are the ones that are most suspect and have the most to hide. And so calling them out and recognizing it that anyone who promotes, pushes, um, encourages or celebrates this trans queer LGBTQ agenda is suspect and is either a pedophile or a pedo apologist, and they need to be watched very closely because they really shouldn't be
Of
around
course,
any.
victims to perpetrators. It's probably
Yes,
it's like you were an innocent little guy and you were victimized, and then
yeah.
you
So
became
so
the
I was
perpetrator at some point. Yeah.
exactly. So I was victimized, and I became a victimizer, and
Hmm.
so that really happened within my years of being trafficked, which is the most common time for a victim to become a victimizer is when they're trafficked because they kind of learn the behavior of you go out now and you do what I did to get you. You love bomb them, you recruit them, and
Hmm.
then you bring them home, and then you'll be okay for the night or for the weekend. You won't have to deal with me. You won't have to deal with all of these guys coming into this home, but because you'll be okay for the night. And so it's kind of like something that you learn. It's a mechanism of coping within that in that world. Throughout my entire teens, my late teens and into my 20s, most of my 20s, I was out there recruiting young, boys. I was out there recruiting youth into that movement. I was doing the same thing they did to me, luring them in, seducing them, using them up, passing them around, profiting off of them. And
And
then,
let me ask you, when you were looking for your victims, is it a certain person, a certain type? I mean, they would
no,
say,
well,
"Oh,
see,
not
we didn't
that
have
guy."
the internet then.
Yeah,
So, because we didn't have the internet,
sure.
which is a very good thing because I'm sure I would have been guilty of a lot more back then. But because we didn't have the internet, it was pretty much and in Philadelphia it was South Street, 13th Street where all the LGBTQ were,
Mm-hmm.
South Street, which were where everybody was, especially the derelicts and the lost and the broken,
Hmm.
Penn's Landing, stuff like that, wherever you could find people who were just out, who were
Marginalized, or yeah,
yeah, they were victims and they were
yeah.
looking for something more, and so they were eventually re-victimized. And I watched it growing up in it. I saw children being seduced in and pimped out and then tossed out like garbage because they were
Mm.
no more good. And then those victims became the victimized, like they started that circle all over again. So it was a dark, dark period.
When you
But
mentioned tossed
I'm
out, I
thankful.
just want, oh, but yeah, I want to mention too, there was a friend of mine who had a twin brother who had a homosexual lifestyle, and he was a strapping, very good-looking guy, very muscular. Then he got sick, and his good time buddies, sugar daddies, wanted nothing to do with him because he was no longer that attractive young man,
Yeah,
muscular. He was sickly, so he went back to his mom. And I didn't meet him, but I have friends of mine that prayed over him, and he said all along he knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew instinctively,
yeah,
but he just had a complete affirming the lifestyle. I also mentioned as a young boy growing up in the Hyde Park section of Boston, I was accosted on a couple of occasions by homosexual older men, not but these guys would be in their late 20s, 30s. And I remember being a little precocious and a little bit big for my physically big. I was able to withstand it. But I recall I lived across the street from a schoolyard, a junior high, and every now and then the place would be littered with pornographic, to be like torn out and there'd be picture of
yeah,
Playboy, things like that. And I was not victimized in this respect, but I know that I had a few people that guys that would, to be looking at it, and some older guy would drive by and say, "Hey, you like that stuff? Come with me. I got more at my house."
yeah.
Is that a typical? It's been such
It
a
is.
long
It
time. I want to
used
make
to
sure my
be.
mind is.
Yeah, so it used to be. I mean, that's how
Yeah,
my first teacher got me.
really, yeah,
He
yeah.
told me that I had to stay after class, and he put a and it's what's weird is that he used the National Geographic.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so I grew up calling it National Pornographic.
Pornographic. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he put it in front of me, and he opened it up, and he started pointing out different pictures and different body parts, and and it just led into it. I had
They started
already
doing
been,
that. The National they go back to like early 1900s, and it was
yeah,
I had a friend of mine who he said back then it was like 95% print and 5% picture, and then I think by the 70s and 80s you got pictures and you got these women that were of course topless from different parts of
yeah,
either sub-Saharan Africa or South America, and that's their national pornographic. Yeah.
yeah. And
Kent
so,
Hovind, the
and for
creation.
me, I mean, we're talking about the late 70s,
Yeah, yeah.
when it was presented to me, and it wasn't just the women, it was the tribal men too that
Oh,
were
sure.
showing.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
showing all, both genitalias. So it was something, because then I remember going to the city library, growing up, and looking for them magazines and going through them and just looking at the pictures and stuff
Mm,
like that. So yeah, it was a dark period, but just to know, because I had men from my age, as a boy, all the way up into their 60s, 70s, maybe 80s,
mm,
that had at some point throughout my childhood abused me. But I can sit back and think about all of the different methods that were used, and I guess that's it helps me more to deal with people and to relate to people. I mean, I don't just have same-sex attracted people or trans-identified people reaching out to me. I have some very people who have been like satanic ritual abuse and
mm,
all kinds of things because of the relation, that we can relate to each other because we've been traumatized by basically the same people, different person but same person. You know what I mean? Um, and so, gosh, there's so many places that we could go from here. Um,
Well, I wanted to ask you, I want to talk a little bit about education, and then I want to get into Ask an Ex-Trans as a sign in the back. I was very impressed with your understanding. You're in your what, mid 40s now, late 40s,
Mid 50s.
mid 50s. You look a lot younger than I thought. But I
Thank you.
remember you were giving a presentation and you really had a great understanding, almost instinctive understanding of government education. So discuss that. What brought this on? Because some people, you know, so-called mature Christians still send their kids or okay with either children or grandchildren in government schools, but wait a minute now, this is wrong. So
Yeah.
kind of go explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so over the years, especially just being able to go to school board meetings, and I see all of these quote unquote Christian people standing up and complaining. Basically, what they're doing is just whining and complaining to the school
Right.
board, because, but tomorrow morning they're putting their children on that little yellow school bus to hell. And so it's kind of like, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? If you're going to continue to comply and to make the compromise of sacrificing your child, then why would you go down there just to be heard? When you, by your own actions, you're not doing anything to stop them from what they're doing. And so it's, for me, it was kind of plain to see
Hmm.
how first it started off with like, well, we're going to remove prayer and we're going to remove God, and you know and then we're going to bring in this, and then we're going to start telling people about this orientation, and orientation really doesn't exist. Sexual orientation, it doesn't exist. We are designed in one design, and so men are designed for one purpose and women are designed for one purpose, and we can't change that design. And so I guess the most fascinating part is that they teach about all these different religions, um, and then they start teaching about all of these sexual orientation, and then they start feeding you the lies of the sexual revolution, like that stems from Alfred Kinsey, like that
Yep.
babies are sexual from birth. And so that leads into children being sexualized. And I mean, it's just a dark, dark it's like a spiral staircase, like pornography, right? It's like you start out thinking it's okay because it's normal, and then you just
Everybody's doing
spiral
it,
down.
right?
Yeah, everybody's doing it, and then it has to get darker and deeper and just more deviant. It has to get more deviant if it's going to go anywhere, right? And if it's going to continue in its purpose, because we don't get the same rush or the same high from it anymore. So we have to go to the next level, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much what they're doing with children. I mean, they target them, and this comes in especially with the SEL, social emotional learning, which was already in the curriculum before we even called it SEL or
Right.
before they called it SEL.
That's right.
It was already, they already knew how to target and separate children by class, by who had two parents, who didn't, who had a came from a broken home, who is likely a victim. And then, over the years, you also learn and discover that even sexual abuse isn't as rare as we believe it to be, that it's in more homes than not.
Are you
Um,
familiar with Project 10?
Project 10, no.
Well, this was back in the 80s and early 90s when Project 10 was something launched by schools, so-called psychiatrists, that it was they would train the teachers to look for potential homosexuals.
Hmm.
And then Project 10 would be 10%. That's the
Right.
Kinsey lie that he threw out, that 10% of the population is homosexual. And the teachers would look for certain signs to indicate that that child might be struggling with his or her identity as a male or female.
Yep.
Things like students who might be doing well, and all of a sudden the grades go down, uh, that are maybe withdrawn. I mean, that could be like half the class. And I remember at the time
Yep.
before I was dating my wife, and I met the sister, and I was telling the sister the story, one of the sisters, and I think the conversation after I left was, gee, he seems like a nice guy, but he's a little weird, buying into this stuff. And, and then about 2 months later, she calls up, Mom was right. There was a front page story, the weekly newspaper talking about it. I said, well, of course I'm right. You think I can make this stuff up? I'm not that creative. And recently, my nephews now, my wife's nephews are grown up, married, and what have you, and they've kept their pretty conservative credentials. There, some of the ones going to a Bible study, the other one is sort of flirting with. But we brought them to the Awana program and all these things that they were little, and they said Uncle Hal was right about everything. Thank you
Yeah.
for the validation. It's not like I thought I was wrong or I wasn't sure about it. And it's just,
Yeah.
I have to thank God just like you do. It's just that uh, somehow God just gave me this. Hey, that you got to take you can't know this and not talk about it and bring it to light. And
Exactly.
I
Like that's
think
one
of
of the most important
yeah,
aspects of all of this. You cannot hear it and learn it and not even take into consideration that it could be true. And if it is true, then you better talk about it as much as you can.
because the Apostle Paul said that have nothing to do with the unfruitful works of darkness, rather
Right.
reprove or expose them. And that's a Christian mandate. It's not something that, well, let
Yes.
someone else do that. And we all have a ministry. If you're a housewife or you're a son or a daughter, you're a teen, you have a ministry. There's people my youngest daughter now, she'll be graduating as a nurse pretty soon and getting married. But I remember when the Roe v. Wade leak came out in May of 22. I remember the date because that's the same day our case, the Supreme Court announced our 9-0 U.S. Supreme Court case. And she's
Isn't
on the
that
phone with she danced at this when she was living in Boston. She danced at like 3 or 4 years old. And one of her so-called dance friends who was pro abortion, she's on the phone with her. And I'm thinking she doesn't need me to discuss. She's making a better argument than I could come up with all kinds of arguments against abortion. And she said, I don't, she, I'm only a hindrance. She's doing fine. So I was very, very glad, that sometimes you think, are they getting it? And then you see that not only are they getting it, but they know more about it than you do after you've
yeah.
introduced them. And I was very happy about. So tell us about Ask an Ex-Trans. This is your new program now you have.
Yeah, so this is like the new outreach, and it's this is probably how this has got to be the most spirit-led outreach that I've done. And so it's actually 3 weeks and 2 days in out in public. And
And this is
it's
May 31st of 2026 to get a, so people, when you say that, they'll know exactly where the time frame.
yes, yes. So this started in March, not May. Whew, I was gonna say May. Wait a minute, I lost some time here. So March, and so yeah, this started in the beginning of March, and I saw a video many, many months ago, probably the end of 2025. I saw a video of a guy standing, and I think he was in New Hampshire, and he had a sign on, and it said, "Ask a transgender anything."
Oh,
And it said, "No, no question is, I'm not going to get mad at
off
anything that."
limits. Asking, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so basically, like nothing is off limits, and so and I could almost like picture myself standing right next to him
Mm,
with a sign on that said, "Ask an ex-trans anything,"
yeah, yeah.
because if you want to know, if a drug addict wants to know if they can get off of drugs, do they go to their drug dealer and say, "How do I get off of drugs?" Or do they go to somebody that has beaten that addiction and is recovered? Do they go to
Mhm.
them and say, "How did you do it? I want to know." And so it's kind of like I kind of think like that, like why take your child or even refer somebody to a trans organization or a trans identified individual to find out if being trans is for them, or if it's just if there's something wrong with that. And why not ask an ex trans? And
Hmm.
so my first appearance with the just the t-shirt on, the t-shirt is front and back, ask an ex trans
Hmm.
anything.
And that's you back on the left in your trans days, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's the before and after. And so I went to a caucus, um and immediately on walking in the door, like six people were boom at the table, and they were like,
Wow.
do you talk about this publicly? Can you, do you, would you come and speak to my committee? Would you come and speak here? Would you do that? Would you come to the gun show and speak? And
A
I was like,
gun show,
wow,
huh? Yeah,
yeah, a
yeah.
gun show. Like,
You
and
spoke,
I'm
by the
like,
way, you
wow.
spoke recently in southern Maine. I almost went. I had a busy day, and I thought, but this was a Republican Party gathering,
Yes,
right?
yeah, the Kittery
Yeah,
Republican
yeah.
Committee invited me. It was actually Elliott, the Elliott Republican
I'm
Committee.
about an hour from Elliott, from where I live
Yeah, so
here.
Elliott and Kittery kind of teamed up together for that one. So yeah, and it's been phenomenal. And one of the things is that it's not aggressive, right? I'm not I'm not some random guy walking around with a sign on that says transgenderism is a mental disorder,
Hmm.
right? And so then they want to argue, well, how would you know, blah, 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 have you ever walked in the shoe, blah, whatever. Um, but it's more aggressive. And so what I've noticed, even because we go out into the streets, we go to big box stores, just walk around, Sam's Club, Target, BJ's, Walmart, wherever, we just go and we just walk around and just linger down every single aisle. It's great for my exercise routine now. But everybody, the most negative that we've gotten so far is maybe somebody rolling their eyes or shaking their head, but that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
No, 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 nothing else. Every single comment is nice shirt, love your shirt, God
Yeah.
bless you, thank you for what you're
Wow.
doing. And then the ones that do come to me and say, my daughter, my son
Mm.
is trapped in this. My neighbor's son can, how can I put him in contact with you? And then so I hand out a lot of materials, a lot of materials.
Yeah.
more than I thought I would be handing out, actually, honestly, between books, postcards, and just cards and little flyers. Um, but I think what's happening is that people, the more they see it, the more comfortable they'll be asking the questions. And that's what we need. We need people to start stepping up and asking questions and not being ashamed. A few of the encounters that really stand out to me was just this last weekend. We were on our way to the 44th annual Maine Sportsman's Show and at the Civic Center in Augusta. And we stopped at a little store to I ran in to get a coffee and I noticed, like, golly, this place is packed. People are waiting in line for for their coffees and whatever. I think it was just a bunch, like a group that came in together
Oh,
or
sure.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I completely forgot I had my Ask an Ex Trans shirt on, and I'm standing there, and I had a jacket on, but it was open, and then I started noticing that they were like kind of peeking at it, not wanting to be, obvious. And so I
Hmm.
decided, well, I'm going to wait in this line. I'm going to take my jacket off. So I took my jacket off and stood there so they could get a better view. And this kid behind me took a picture of my shirt from behind and then came around to show it to somebody in front of me. And the guy looked at him and he looked at the kid and he says, "That's not very nonchalant, man." He's like, he knows what you did. So what? So I said, "Do you have any questions?" And the kid said, "Not at this time." But I got to the
Right.
counter and the guy working behind the counter was trans.
Yeah.
And he kept looking at my shirt when I was the next one in line. And it was four employees that were working their butts off, filling orders and doing the drive by through, and then the orders coming in, and then people that were waiting for orders, and they were working their butts off. And I was like, but I saw him go to one guy and say something, and the guy was like, "I'm busy, man. I gotta finish this." And then he went over to the lady who was the manager, and he said something to her, and she was like, "It's fine. Go ahead." And
Hmm.
I guess what I'm thinking is, right, what I believe is that he didn't want to wait on me. Uh,
Ah,
because he was uncomfortable. I guess
sure.
he expected me to be rude or ignorant or,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. And so he came up and says, "What can I get you?" But he kept looking at my shirt, and then he'd look at my eyes, and then he'd look at my shirt, and then I said, "Just a large hot black coffee. That's it." And so I gave him money, and he went to hand me change. I said, "No, you keep that, man. You are running around here like a chicken with your head cut off. You're doing a great job." And he said, "Well, thank you." And then he went and got my coffee and he handed it to me. When he handed it to me, I kind of put my hand over his when I
Hmm.
grabbed the cup. And I looked at him and I looked him right in his eyes and I was like, "Really, you're doing a great job." I was like, "So you just know that you're doing a good job. Keep doing a good job." And he said, "Thank you." And that, like, I turned around to walk out of there and there was a lady standing in the line and she like kind of reached out to touch my arm like to comfort me. There was another guy standing there who was definitely a Mainer, from head to toe, and he just gave me this
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
nod, like good, good, and that was like I could have ended my day there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we go to the Civic Center, and there was over 1,500 people there that were zoned in on that T-shirt. And I mean, they couldn't take their eyes off of it. They were whispering behind me, "He's ex-transgender." Wow. And so, but what I found most, I don't even know if the ironic would be the word about that day is that out of all of the men, besides one vendor who me and him had a nice long conversation, and he was a Christian man that works with veterans. And I ended up giving him a book and a postcard because he was all in the shirt, and that was you. Wow, this is beautiful. Your testimony is beautiful, and
Mm.
all of this stuff. And but out of all of the men there and the adults, it was one 16-year-old kid that saw the shirt and immediately came right to me, said, "I have a question."
Mm.
And so it was like, wow, out of all these adults, it takes a young man, a teenager, to come up and say, "I have a question." And so I knew everybody that saw the shirt had a question. because everybody knows somebody that
Mhm.
is being saturated and into this identity crisis, right? And so that's the message. The message is, if you truly love them, then you will want to know what happened to them. You will want to know what caused their dissociative disorder, what caused their identity crisis. You would want to know that. Um, I mean, and so this has been probably the most blessed outreach that I've done in 16 years. And I've done a lot of outreach
And you
for
know,
a
it's
lot
so
of
low
different.
tech. It's a t-shirt. It's not
That's
like you
it.
had a gigantic truck with all the high tech stuff. It's a t-shirt
That's
and
it.
your
And that's all it
testimony.
takes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's all it takes. And handing them out some materials. And, I mean, in Maine, a lot of people know who I am, especially in the political realm, because I was going to the state house and giving testimony and going to school boards but and and so a lot of them are just like, I think they lean more towards what the world is, and the world doesn't believe in redemption.
Of course.
Half
Yeah.
of the church don't believe in redemption. But so they lean that way, and so it's really been a blessing the last couple, actually the last month, to see so many of the GOP and the Republican committees really step up and say, "Hey, you know what? This man has been redeemed, and we need him to come and talk to us about this
Hmm.
because we all need to know." And when I went to one of the meetings, all I can say is everybody in the room participated with questions, concerns, commentary, and one of the attendees came up to me afterwards and just poured out
Mm.
about his sibling and about their father and about abuse and about
Mm.
and just poured it out. And it really shocked the chair, because the chair was standing next to me, and they were like, wow, I never knew any of
Yeah.
that. And so, wow, and I've known that person for how long?
Hmm.
And none of it ever came out
Yeah.
because none of it was ever talked about. And when I start talking to them, saying transparency is the key. If we don't talk about our deepest, darkest stuff openly, I mean, first
Hmm.
of all, when you first come to the cross, you're going to have to speak it anyway to release the power that it has over you. But to know that confession is not done in confidence. Confession is not done in a wooden box. It's not.
Hmm.
Confession is done one to another so that you may be healed. That's what it's done for. It's for healing and to release the power that those things hold over you.
Mm.
So, we're not doing it in confidence. We're not doing it just on one on one. Now, that is how we should start. We should start out one on one, doing it, because that makes it easier to
Mhm.
speak those things. Because some of these things are hard to speak out loud. I mean, like one of the guys came up to me the other night and says, I had never in my life saw any man ever get up in front of a room full of people and say, my proof is my past, I'm a registered sex offender, and there you
Yeah.
have it. And
Yeah.
he's like, when you said that, he said, I knew you were the one, the real deal. He said, but
Mm.
two, my brother. And he hugged me, and I was just like blown away, like, wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what it is. It takes us to start being bold. And
Redemption.
yeah, and
Yeah.
if we're not bold about it, if we're not telling people, like, how would you know? How would I know? How much time do you have? Have a seat, get a notebook, because I
Mhm.
can let you know how I know.
Right.
And like, go through it with people. Actually talk to people. I mean, some people will say, "Oh, but you're this and you used to." Yeah, I sure was. I sure
Mm.
was. And that should be the first warning sign you have to allow your child to even think about going into that cult,
Right.
and you should not be an ally of that cult. And this is why. And if you
Yeah, what
are, then
troubles
you're promoting their deviant behaviors.
the enablers, we love our children, and boy, if you don't do this, they're going
Yes.
to commit. That's one of the lies they told, that
Mm,
it's either your boy becomes a girl or you have a dead boy. And I think
exactly. So
that's a,
dead son or living
yeah,
trans daughter is
yeah,
emotional blackmail. It's a lie
yeah,
from the pit of hell.
yeah, exactly.
I was the suicidal trans kid. I was the suicidal trans kid that's always tossed into these debates and arguments. But what they don't want you to know is I was also the suicidal trans adult,
Yeah.
because affirmation, gender affirming care, wrong sex hormones, diversity, equity, inclusivity, none of that stuff takes away depression, angst,
hmm
brokenness, suicidal ideation, trauma, underlying conditions, comorbidities, none of it. It
mm,
all remains there. And sometimes there's a utopia, right? Or a euphoria, I should call it, that we go through, and it's different amount of time for everybody. But some people may seem happier
right.
once they start transitioning. But there will definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, come a time when they recognize that they are still the same broken, hurting,
hmm
depressed, confused, delusional person that they were before they started transitioning. You know how, for me, when I hit the streets in Philadelphia at 14, two of the people that I idolized the most were two post-operative transgenders that I had met, and we became friends, or friends as far as in the world friends.
hmm
Um, I idolized them. They were beautiful. They were always laughing and always happy and had money and were, everything that I just aspired to be. Like, I mean, some people at 14, think about a career. I wanted to be the best prostitute I could be.
I
And the
wanted to play
best,
left field for the Boston Red Sox, I think.
yeah, and me, I was just trying to figure out how I could be the best hooker I could be. I mean,
Well,
it's
yeah,
crazy, but that was my mindset. And
sure. Yeah.
so I was well into my 20s, probably mid 20s, and I went to New York City to get castrated.
Mm,
And I was sitting on a beach with those two post-operative transgenders that I idolized. And we were sitting on a beach on Coney Island, and we were talking and laughing and having a good old time. And then all of a sudden, one of them looked at me and he said, "Don't do it."
mm,
And I said, "Don't do what?" And he said, "All of my life," he said, "I thought if I could just become a woman, I would find peace and joy and happiness." He
hmm
said, "Now I am legally and medically a woman." He says, "And I'm more miserable
Misery.
now than I've
Yeah.
ever been my entire life." He said, "And I think about taking my life every day." And the other
Mm.
one looked at me and said, "I get on the subway several times a day. And every single time that train comes up the track, I think about stepping
Oh,
off
I
the
want to.
platform in front of it."
Gee,
He said,
yeah.
"Every single time. You
Wow.
don't want to be us." And so, I went back to my hotel room. I curled up in a ball. I cried my
Oh,
eyes out, and I didn't get it done. And I thought, if this isn't going to bring me peace and joy and happiness,
well, no.
and
Mm,
what does that mean? That means that I can now talk about my feelings because I haven't been happy.
mm,
I've been being told by other people, like, "Oh no, you only feel like that because you have to keep pushing on in transition." And now two people that have finalized their transition have just told me, "Don't do it."
don't do it. Yeah.
That you're not going to find what you're looking for, that this path it has no happy endings. And and so of course it's like, and it comes down to a pride thing, right? So like for me, it was the pride of having to admit that I was wrong. And so for a lot of them, it's the pride thing. I mean, I know a couple post operatives right now that have contacted me and go on to try to argue with me back and forth through emails that they're happy and
hmm
content and secure. And I said, "Well, if you really were, you wouldn't be arguing with me. It's like
That's right. They would. Yeah.
you're not trying to convince me
Yeah.
because I already know the truth, and so you wouldn't be trying to convince yourself so
hmm
hard
hmm
if you truly were happy and content." So,
So, Dave, how can people learn more about your ministry, your website, and of course your program, Ask an Ex Trans? So,
IbelongAmen.com is the website. On
and I'll
YouTube,
put a
it's
link in the description of the video. There'll be a link there so people can go and find it.
all right, great, thanks. And yeah, and on YouTube, it's at I Belong Amen. On Facebook, it is I
Thank
Belong
you.
Amen Min, MIN. Yeah, and I think I'm still on X. Not even, yeah, I think I am.
Okay.
But it's, yeah, it's I Belong Amen, or IBA Ministries. But yeah, so IBelongAmen.com is the website, and then you can find all the social or unsocial, anti-social media
Yeah, it
links
does.
on there.
All right. Well, Dave, so I'm looking forward to seeing you again after so many years. And
Yes.
folks, you've been watching and listening to the Camp Constitution Report with your host, Hal Shurtleff. And you can find us again on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, and all kinds of other social media outlets. And with that, until next time, may God richly bless you.